viewers, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program Completely Blind, Unaided, Unhelped, Unseen Chat, Unseen Interactions, all those things. And I want to talk about the best and the worst day. Unsurprisingly, the worst day actually comes first with this. I had a full day of probably 7 hours of achieving net zero. I had a really good previous day. I had managed to reach the moon, and that was extraordinary. Managed to get close and then crash onto it. Was trying to, didn't quite have the fuel to slow us down, and it's got no atmosphere, so parachutes didn't work or anything like that. But did get to it, and that was a monumentous occasion. It was so good. It just felt amazing to break away from the minutiae of being trapped on the planet to getting to this other body out in space and having a pretty good grasp in general of how things start to work. Because the hardest part about Kerbal is there's tons and tons of options that aren't particularly intuitive, I would say, as to how they work. One of the things I realized recently is it just color choice matters when you make a game. So when you're using the SAS helper, it's like a guidance helper. My lights just went off, so we'll have footage up here. There's a very weird situation where it's in red. That looks like it's unavailable. It's not. It just means not active. And I accidentally was clicking around on it and it activated. And these give you the ability to lock on to important functions like prograde and retrograde. So you don't have to keep tapping the keys and stuff. The guys will just lock onto it. Lots of little bits and bobs like that. But the sad thing was that the next day I came in really confident that we're going to try and land on the moon. I wasn't sure how we could do that. My theory was that I would just essentially turn the rocket so it would just slow us down. I would have to get there with using a little less fuel. I started to use the maneuver nodes so I could figure out generally how to work things. I'm still not clear on these at all. I've done these burns now many times using the maneuver node, and it's all set up correctly. I've fine-tuned it and fiddled with it, but it doesn't quite work. So I'll be honest, I kind of got to the point where I was considering whether I could do this at the end of the day. I was like, I think I need help at this point, because there are training courses in the game and that you could do, but they use some functions that you just don't have. And I think this is where there's a disparity, because Chris has mentioned to me that there's several modes to the game. One is career mode, which is what I'm doing, and science mode. And in science mode, things like money aren't an option, and there's certainly a huge amount of upgrades and abilities that your Kerbals get when their corresponding building is upgraded. And so that became very apparent when people were trying to get information to me, certainly regarding the science, which we'll get to in a second. Hey, take a sample. It's and I'm like, this doesn't happen. And we definitely had more than one occasion now where things just don't seem to happen that we want to have happen. So I was very dejected. I genuinely was very dejected. And when I opened the chat at the end of the day, because I give a pre-warning, okay, I'm coming to the chat now, no spoilers, but I do want to discuss the day, and what we did and how it went, and are you guys having fun? Because I don't know. It's honestly one of the scariest things about doing something like this is I have no idea if my audience is enjoying this. For all I know, everybody's tuned out and the chat is dead. I run a very interactive stream. I try and run my stream, and I've always said this, coming to a bar. Cheers. You should turn up to the stream and we have a good back and forth, and everybody knows your name. And I endeavor to accomplish that on all occasions. So I came back in and I was like, I don't know, man. I kind of feel I think what I said was, can you get in one word, summarize something I'm missing? One word. So that could be what would be an example following our best day, which we'll get to in a second. I think the obvious one would be just to say science, because we made zero science. I was doing contracts, or trying to do some of the contracts to gain science, but I noticed they were giving 3 science, and your upgrades are 90. So 3 ain't it. But I had tried the science, and I had done the science training mission, and it was just do science, which is click the the thermometer and the pressure gauge and stuff. But I had noticed very quickly that once you've done that, you don't get any more. More on that later. And so I wasn't really focused on that. The fun I was having is building rockets that actually achieve something. That was the fun bit. But we're now not getting upgrades, which means we're not getting newer engines, more efficient engines that can do more options for building. Things like that just weren't happening. So I had this entire day where we achieved nothing. We didn't regress. I wouldn't say we regressed, but we didn't move forward either. Because I went back to... all I wanted to do was achieve orbit while having a craft that had basically a full fuel tank once I was in orbit. So I wanted to build the booster that gets you to orbit. Then I would have a craft that I can do stuff with in orbit. But I was using so much fuel to get to orbit that by the time we were up there, I couldn't really do anything. Right? I could shoot off to the moon, sure. But like barely, and certainly not come back. Right? And so, when I opened the chat for that, I got a ton of abuse. Just absolute abuse. Relentless abuse, which is what I expect from my audience, honestly. They want me to have no help and to struggle. That is the point of the challenge, so I kind of get it. But it did lead to a lot of people feeling like, okay, he's just going to give up on this, and that's not the case. They were very concerned. They are having a lot of fun, and they were like, we don't want, and but he's clearly just not happy. And of course I'm not happy. I'm frustrated. We didn't get anywhere, right? That's normal. We didn't progress. It's like a really bad raid night. Where you spent all night and like didn't really get past the phase you were at last time. Like, that's not fun. So yeah, it was that feeling, not the give up feeling. It's like, okay, we need to retool. But I did have to rethink my approach. And that's what I was thinking about at home afterwards. I was like, what do we do here? And I was like, I have to accept this is a super nerd game. It is. It's a mega nerd game. That's what this is. This is a video game. It's a simulator more than anything else, which I don't play. I don't play Flight Simulator. I don't really care whether the ailerons are accurate. I don't play driving simulators. I don't really like that. I play video games for the fantasy escape. I like being a big giant smoky warrior or a space marine and all that kind of stuff. I want the fantasy stuff. I have no aspirations of being an astronaut. That's not what the reality of it. Sure, I love Star Trek, but being beamed up and just rocking at warp speed ain't really the same as like figuring out your thrust to weight ratios. Right? That's not the same thing. Very different thing. But that is what this game is. And so I was like, okay. I was sat thinking to myself, I was like, I'm going to have to nerd. I'm going to have to geek. I'm going to have to accept it. But on the other side of that, once we have certain information with us, then it should enable good progress because we're doing things. So I came in the next day and then began the best day that we've had so far. The first thing I did is I went right back to bare bones. I have a general understanding of how the game works in putting a rocket together, how these pieces sort of function for the most part. I don't understand many of them, to be honest. But we got a general idea. So I still wanted to achieve the objective of how do we get something into space, into orbit, without having to use basically every resource we have. And the obvious thing is your booster needs to be has certain values in order to achieve that, which you can figure out in the vehicle assembly plan. So I was like, all right, I built the most. So I figured, I applied some gaming logic. I was like, I figured that the first thing the game gives you is probably about right. Generally speaking, it can get you up to the upper atmosphere. So it's like, it's probably something close to what that is. So I built like the most bare bones rocket that you can build, ignoring all the upgrades I've ever had, and then shot it off and just paid attention. And what I saw was we were going too fast. Because it shows you by like the craft, like, not setting on fire, but you're getting a lot of resistance because you're moving too fast. And then from watching that a couple of times and just looking around the screen at the game's information, you can see the G-force meter. And the G-force meter has a green, a red, and a big gray area in the middle. Logically, you probably want to be in the green or just slightly outside the green. Okay, so I started turning down the thrust until that happened, because it doesn't change your delta V. Delta V. Like, I will say this has become very apparent to me. I know it seems like a very distant genre, but it's the mentality the same. And I said this yesterday, as before we started, and people were like, "Yep, this has the KSP has Dark Souls syndrome," which is the way it's talked about by people who understand this game is really, really obnoxious. Like, incredibly obnoxious. Even though it's just a video game and you can figure it out, right? I've beaten every Souls game there is, but I don't go around, you know, stroking my cock at it every single step of the way. But a lot of people do. If you've ever interacted with those fandoms, like outside of like your friends at school or college or work or whatever, if you ever go to those like subreddits or forums or whatever surrounding those kind of games, they are another level. So this game carries that weight. And so I just started looking around at the data, like the Delta V, and then I was like, there's a few acronyms that I don't know. I could Google them, like, you know what I mean? Like ISP, I don't know what that means. But I do know is like the basic data. This one, when you choose an engine, it says ASL, so atmosphere, I guess, and sea level, is a certain number, and then vacuum. So this one works better in space. This one works better in an atmosphere. All right. But the important ones are delta V and thrust to weight ratio. So when I just adjusted the thrust until we got a nice, gentle but working, and I started just taking notes. The paper's back. Final Fantasy XIV fans, the paper is back. Got my notes. And I started writing. I was like, okay, a thrust to weight ratio. And I landed after a few adjustments at like 1.5-ish. Seems all right. So I just put a tick next to that. It's very scientific. NASA would be so impressed. I was like, 1.5 seems all right. And then I was like, okay, that seems cool. So then I started shooting stuff into above 70,000 kilometers, which is the atmosphere. I was like, okay, so then we can get into orbit. What gets us up there? And this one is really weird because this is based on delta V, which is just your ability to change velocity, right? We learned this in high school. And it's around 3,000. I can tell you that. It's around there somewhere. It's around there somewhere. Is there a definitive number? I have no idea. I have done it nicely with 2,789. 3,600 or something we had was a little too much. And the problem I'm having, and there's probably a way in the game of figuring this out, is your delta V changes as you shed weight. Because you're moving less mass, right? Pretty obvious. But I don't know how you figure that out. Like at the... I mean, I kind of do, but I don't want to do it. There's a level of nerdiness I'm not getting into, right? Is you have a chart, like a little box, and you can say, at this altitude, your delta V is this. So what I could do, in theory, well, not in theory, in practice, is go, right, I put this booster on, this will engage at this altitude. So that gives me this delta V value. So I can write that down. And then I can add the next booster to it. Right? And I say this one's going to engage at this altitude, at this weight. Write that down. And then I can put on the base booster, for example, and add that up. And then I will get a reasonably accurate overall delta V. I'm not doing that. I'm not. The only really good thing I've figured out was the thing that's going to operate in orbit, we're not going to use for takeoff. So if I take if I turn that thrust all the way to 0, that nulls that out. But the number kept changing. And then sometimes it just wouldn't show me the delta V values. I think I don't know if it's a bug or whether I'm activating something. I have no idea. If I took the engine off and just reapplied it, it came back. But it made the whole thing very frustrating. So I've landed on the very scientific somewhere around 3,000. Gets you up there. Nailed it. So I was doing all this testing, right? I was doing this for an hour or so, getting to these values. And then I was like, okay, now I've got these. Because realistically, this stuff just scales up. The thrust to weight ratio should stay the same. If you just change it, then you're going to change how quickly you're going up and blah, blah, blah. So I then needed to build a bigger one so I could actually test all this. Because these were all small rockets. So now I needed to build my big one to test this whole process out. And it worked. Worked really nicely. I'm not even joking. It worked really nicely. I got it up there. I had a full tank of gas when I was in orbit. I was in a nice orbit. Nice and circular. It was very pretty. The USS Math is what I called it. And I was like, I have so much fuel. I have so much room for activities. So I was like, I could go to the moon now and orbit the moon. I think I can do that. So I got my maneuver node out and I fiddled with it, which is awkward as hell. There's got to be a better way of doing this. It's so awkward to do it between two distant bodies because the icon's so small. I found a little window in the bottom left so you could do like micro stuff, but essentially you're just reading a number, like how close you're going to get. It's very cool how it shows it in the game though. I think this is awesome. It shows your orbit, but then once it will tell you, it's like, okay, you're now going to intercept with the moon and its gravity, so it gives you a different arc, which you can then adjust. And so I did that. Again, this is where I figure the burns are really weird. Like it's got a T-, go, but it always ends differently. And I don't know why. Even if I I don't know. There's something weird with it. Maybe you go a bit earlier. Maybe you go not as fast. Maybe it doesn't mean full burn. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. Either way, I did it. I orbited the moon. I was like overwhelmingly happy. Overwhelmingly happy. I don't sound it. I don't sound it. And here's why. I orbited the moon. And then I calculated my exit trajectory. People who like KSP love using the proper terminology. I swear to God, it's so weird. But our escape velocity. I'm only mocking because I find it really funny because it's a stupid Kerbal Goblin game. And then line myself up to get back to Kerbin and fight it off. And did. Got back. Cool. I had loads of fuel left. Tons of fuel left. What I didn't notice is that while I was well within the atmosphere of Kerbin, I think I was at like 58 kilometers, which is well within the atmosphere, and just called that good, is actually I was going to, and it did show me on the screen, I checked the VOD, that I was going to skip over it and come back round for the largest elliptical orbit that exists. So me not noticing that, once I got within the atmosphere, I jettisoned the rest of my craft, ready for a nice, safe landing, and then noticed that I was off on a magical adventure around the solar system. And I did a perfect orbit. I did a perfect approach to the moon. Orbited the moon. Came back safe and sound with tons of fuel. And then lost my astronaut, who is now once again joining. There's a lot of memes flying around about this playthrough that I'm rebuilding Saturn. I can't even complain. Because there's so many Kerbals doing laps. I can get them back. Somehow. I don't know how I do it. But I can get them back. I can get them back. We then played a different game for the next couple of hours. Met Chameleon with Annie and a few streamers. And came back to Kerbal because I was very lost on the science thing. I'm super lost. So I just started trying stuff out with science, and I found it now. I don't like it. You can even do experiments like on your own planet, like the temperature and pressure readings, which makes no sense to me. We're building spaceships. We should know that. You know the weirdest thing is? Ladders. You know how deep in the tech tree it is to get a ladder? It's very odd. It's really weird because you can take your Kerbals out of the ship and go EVA and take reports of the planet's surface, which you'll be able to do on the moon and stuff. But if there's anything above the cabin, they can't get back in. So I was like, all right, we need a ladder. And then I looked for it for about 5 minutes and I found it. And it's like tier 4 of the tech tree is ladders. I'm like, we should probably learn to make ladders before we make rocket ships, in my eyes. That's logical. But I did make a lot of science and got a lot of upgrades. But I have got now a clear trajectory. It was the best day. It was the best day. It's just sad a couple of ways because I learned science a lot more. I learned that you can do these experiments at all these different levels, different biomes. I assume I'm supposed to fly around Kerbin and do a bunch of testing there. But I know my path for today. My next goal, of course, is to land on the moon. And ideally take off, I guess. But the landing it's called, is like tier 5. It's got quite late on. Maybe I just leave someone there. What's one more to add to the pile? They live there now. That's their home. They live on the moon. Maybe. I don't know. But yes, I want to get a bunch of science. I want some new engines so we can do some bigger and greater things, because that's my big joy. And land on the moon. But I think what I need to do next is probably a lap of Kerbin, do some readings, and then do the moon, orbit the moon and do a bunch of readings. Probably a nice gentle start to the day. Something like that. And then we can look at doing something a little spicier. There's a second moon in the orbiting, so I probably need to do the same to that. And after that, I think we're going to Duna. So I'm hoping the upgrades we get there will enable us to land on Duna, which is the ultimate goal of this playthrough. So there you go. My best day and my worst day. The next day should be entirely average. Maybe. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.